Different sentences with words. River. The river flowed swiftly. The river flowed swiftly. She skipped stones across the river. She skipped stones across the river. He fished for trout in the river. He fished for trout in the river. Lake. The lake shimmered in the sunlight. The lake shimmered in the sunlight. She swam in the cool waters of the lake. She swam in the cool waters of the lake. He picnicked by the tranquil lake. He picnicked by the tranquil lake. Ocean. The ocean stretched to the horizon. The ocean stretched to the horizon. She listened to the roar of the ocean. She listened to the roar of the ocean. He sailed across the vast ocean. He sailed across the vast ocean. Beach. The beach was covered in white sand. The beach was covered in white sand. She built sand castles on the beach. She built sand castles on the beach. He walked hand in hand with her on the beach. He walked hand in hand with her on the beach. Island. The island was uninhabited. The island was uninhabited. She dreamed of owning her own island. She dreamed of owning her own island. He explored the tropical island. He explored the tropical island. Mountain. The mountain loomed in the distance. The mountain loomed in the distance. She climbed to the summit of the mountain. She climbed to the summit of the mountain. He skied down the steep slopes of the mountain. He skied down the steep slopes of the mountain. Valley. The valley was lush and green. The valley was lush and green. She hiked through the valley. She hiked through the valley. He gazed out over the valley below. He gazed out over the valley below. Hill. The hill was dotted with wildflowers. The hill was dotted with wildflowers. She rolled down the grassy hill. She rolled down the grassy hill. He stood atop the highest hill. He stood atop the highest hill. Forest. The forest was dense and dark. The forest was dense and dark. She wandered through the forest. She wandered through the forest. And he listened to the sounds of the forest. He listened to the sounds of the forest. Tree. The tree stood tall and proud. The tree stood tall and proud. She climbed to the top of the tree. She climbed to the top of the tree. He carved their initials into the tree. He carved their initials into the tree. Flowers. The flower bloomed in vibrant colors. The flower bloomed in vibrant colors. She picked a bouquet of wildflowers. She picked a bouquet of wildflowers. He admired the delicate petals of the flower. He admired the delicate petals of the flower. Grass. The grass was soft beneath her feet. The grass was soft beneath her feet. She lay in the sun-dappled grass. She lay in the sun-dappled grass. He mowed the grass on a hot summer day. He mowed the grass on a hot summer day. Weed. She pulled up the weed from the garden. She pulled up the weed from the garden. He sprayed the weed with herbicide. He sprayed the weed with herbicide. The weed choked out the other plants. The weed choked out the other plants. Vines. The vine wound its way up the trellis. The vine wound its way up the trellis. She swung from the vine like Tarzan. She swung from the vine like Tarzan. He tasted the ripe grapes from the vine. He tasted the ripe grapes from the vine. Leaves. The leaf fluttered to the ground. The leaf fluttered to the ground. She raked up a pile of leaves. She raked up a pile of leaves. He admired the changing colors of the leaves. He admired the changing colors of the leaves. Root. The root dug deep into the soil. The root dug deep into the soil. She chopped the root vegetables for dinner. She chopped the root vegetables for dinner. He traced the root of the problem. He traced the root of the problem. Stem. The stem held up the delicate flower. The stem held up the delicate flower. She trimmed the excess leaves from the stem. She trimmed the excess leaves from the stem. He studied the anatomy of the stem. He studied the anatomy of the stem. Petals. The petal was soft to the touch. The petal was soft to the touch. She plucked the petal from the flower. She plucked the petal from the flower. He admired the symmetry of the petals. He admired the symmetry of the petals. Bud. The bud was just beginning to open. The bud was just beginning to open. She eagerly awaited the buds blooming. She eagerly awaited the buds blooming. He picked a bud to give to his crush. He picked a bud to give to his crush. Thorn. The thorn pricked his finger. The thorn pricked his finger. She carefully avoided the thorn. She carefully avoided the thorn. He trimmed the thorn bushes in the garden. He trimmed the thorn bushes in the garden. Fruit. The fruit was ripe and juicy. The fruit was ripe and juicy. She picked the fruit from the tree. She picked the fruit from the tree. He enjoyed the sweet taste of the fruit. He enjoyed the sweet taste of the fruit. Vegetables. The vegetable garden thrived in the sun. The vegetable garden thrived in the sun. She chopped up the fresh vegetables for soup. She chopped up the fresh vegetables for soup. He planted rows of vegetables in the spring. He planted rows of vegetables in the spring. Seed. The seed sprouted into a plant. The seed sprouted into a plant. She planted the seed in the soil. She planted the seed in the soil. He saved the seed for next year's crop. He saved the seed for next year's crop. Soil. The soil was rich and fertile. The soil was rich and fertile. She dug her hands into the damp soil. She dug her hands into the damp soil. He tilled the soil before planting. He tilled the soil before planting. Worm. The worm wriggled in the dirt. The worm wriggled in the dirt. She baited the hook with a fat worm. She baited the hook with a fat worm. He watched the worm inch along the sidewalk. He watched the worm inch along the sidewalk. Englito, all about learning English.